Hey guys, so welcome back to my YouTube channel. This video is going to be the first in a series of videos where I'm going to go through the different sections of the Dread Elf Legendary Army book. It's a relatively new book, so hopefully this style of videos, this series of videos is going to be quite useful to a lot of different people. I have been involved in the playtesting of the book, so I know my way around a little bit by now. Like the options are not that daunting as they were before, and also with the playtesting process, I got a little bit of the gist of what the designers wanted with some choices they made. So yeah, first it's going to be the characters section. The characters, I will discuss all of the characters individually with their different special equipment choices from the Dread Elf book. And then afterwards, I'll also discuss the general arcane compendium upgrades for the Dread Elf characters in general. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's start with the Dread Prince. So the Dread Prince, it used to be, well, it is the equivalent of the Lord level character. And in 9th Age, we now don't have any distinguishing factors anymore between lords and heroes. But it's basically a character with, well, in this case, 5 attacks. The offense has been bumped up to 8, but the defense has been bumped down to 6 because Dread Elves is supposed to be very offensive. And the discipline has been bumped down to 9 instead of 10. This is to change the roles of the characters a little bit more and to make it more valuable to also take, for example, the Legion Legate, who does have the discipline 10. But is a less, well, a character with less offensive capabilities. So the Dread Prince is basically your melee powerhouse, and when we were playtesting it, the Deadly Riposte rule was quite some criticism against it, because it would only trigger quite occasionally, especially because initially it was only on foot, and then later it became this, I believe, and then still the community tried to convince the designers that it should be on a natural 1 and on a 2 to hit if the Dread Prince was on foot, just to incentivize people to field the model on foot. Whilst right now there's not really an incentive for it. In my latest battle reports, I have tried to field it on foot, but I don't really see the benefit now, because there's, as I can see, no real restrictions otherwise, other than the Seal of the Republic that allows you to get some decent armor save on foot. So yeah, with these characters, all other character choices, basically, they also went into the avenue of restricting the weapon options and the mount options for the different characters. So the Dread Prince is only able to go on an Elven horse, a Ghost Raptor, or a Raptor chariot. So he's excluded from the Pegasus, from the Manticore, and from the Dragon. So that is quite an interesting design pathway. And also in the melee weapons, you can see that he doesn't have access to the Blades of Darak, and he doesn't have access to a spear either. I think the spear is the big thing here, because a spear on this model would be absolutely amazing, because then you can get the agility bump to ensure that you're really going fast. You can get some extra AP, you can put the Touch of Greatness or some other thing, enchantment on it to get 1 extra strength, and then you're just golden. Because strength 4 with Ruthless Efficiency is good, because effectively in the first round of combat you're at strength 5, but in the grind you're not going to be strength 5 anymore, you're going to go back to your strength 4, so that might be a little bit of a downside. Yeah, so as you can see, I color-coded all of the enchantments also, just to give an indication of how good I think they are for the model. So let's start with Crippling Frost. This is the 95-point Great Weapon enchantment. I think in general a Great Weapon on this guy is really good, because you already have your offensive 8, you already have your lightning reflexes, so you are striking first. Getting to a 2-up armor save is going to be, or even a 1-up armor save, is going to be relatively easy with the Seal of the Republic. So the combination of Crippling Frost and the Seal of the Republic, combined with something like a Talisman of Shielding and a Potion of Swiftness, that is going to be a really attractive combination. I think right now the combination is 5 points over the limit, so you might want to skip on the potion of swiftness, even though that is really risky with the crippling frost and just the seal of the Republic. So I would say that with crippling frost, I would always play it with a potion of swiftness, just to ensure that you go first, even against the very threatening models that might want to challenge you into a duel, and then basically shut down your crippling frost for a round. Crippling Frost itself, it gives you an extra strength, it gives you an extra AP, but at the moment where you're already at AP 3 with strength 6 with +1 to wound, you might not really need it anymore. So the benefit that it gives, the static benefit of for 95 points is kind of moot. But then again, in a duel, it's really daunting to decrease the amount of attacks that are going to come back at you. Yeah, so I played this guy on foot a couple of times now, and I was not that impressed because people started just hitting my unit. I think it's an upgrade that you should take if you take a mount option, and maybe preferably the Raptor Chariot, because it seems just like a good mount to have this enchantment on. Just Raptor Chariots in general as mounts seem quite good because they do add quite some offensive power to a charging model, which is what the Dread Elves want. Then we have Lacerating Touch. This is an upgrade for your paired weapons. So it does increase your AP and it does increase your attack value. So on the paired weapons, this brings your Dread Prince to a total of 8 attacks at strength 4 with +1 to wound, which is quite impressive indeed. However, if you pair it up against Hero's Heart, then probably Hero's Heart is going to be better in my opinion. You do get the benefit of also causing fear, and this pairs quite nicely with Mask of the Warcrow, because then you also get to reroll your natural to wounds rolls of once. If you combine them though, then you're at 100 points instead of the 60 points for Hero's Heart. Hero's Heart gives you +1 strength compared to this, because you're going to strength 5. You will still benefit from your +1 to wound. You still get +1 attack, so not the +2 from the Lacerating Touch. So you're missing out on 1 attack to get an extra strength. I guess if you already have 7 attacks, then the extra attack is going to be less valuable than the extra strength. And also on the long term, in the grind, it's going to be quite valuable to have this strength 5 instead of strength 4. So only if you capitalize on the fact of getting fear on this model, you're going to get revenue out of this, I think. So that would mean a combination with the Mask of the Warcrow, and then it gets expensive quite quickly. I think I'd rather just put the Mask on the Warcrow on another model. Transcendence, it's never been a fan favorite for me, because it's an enchantment that goes on a lance. So you want to charge with this guy. On the charge, it doesn't do anything, and then afterwards you get extra strength and AP for the rest of the game. So basically it turns your weapon then in a great weapon that you can use with a shield, and that's the only benefit you get out of it. So to me, the only benefit that you would need would be to just get a great weapon with Seal of the Republic, and then you basically have your Transcendence already right from the get-go, or with an Essence of Mithril to be at a similar cost. Yeah, for me it's not really a weapon that I would take. Then we go to the Pride of God Dikos. This is a halberd enchantment. The halberd is also an interesting option for the Dread Prince, because, well, you get the extra strength that we already discussed before. You get the extra attack, so it's really close to being Hero's Heart. It is cheaper though, so that is really nice. And your attacks become divine attacks and magical attacks. It is really interesting for 35 points if you can capitalize on divine attacks. Otherwise, yeah, the Hero's Heart is still really attractive. I mean, you can just put it on a hand weapon even, and then it's quite comparable to this weapon enchantment, giving also an extra attack, setting your strength also to strength 5, yet giving you AP 3. Yeah, divine attacks likely is better than getting AP 3, but then again you get a shield with Hero's Heart. I think Hero's Heart is just in general a really good item for any Elven model. And then with the Dread Elves with the +1 to wound on strength 5, it's strength 6 is really, really nice to have. We have a special Aegis item, which is the Moiter's Mirror. So for every successful Aegis roll on a 5+, the bearer immediately inflicts a hit with strength 5 AP2 and magical attacks against the model that caused it. And you also get Aegis 5+. So this is not only in combat, this is also with ranged attacks, like the snipe spells that some people use. If you're going to snipe this guy and you make your Aegis roll, then you do inflict a 1 hit with strength 5 AP2. So first they wanted to kind of just rebound the hit that was caused. So if you do a strength 10 AP 10 D3 wounds hit on it, then it would rebound. Then it would be really good probably against snipes. But then the only thing it does is basically make you immune to snipes unless the enemy just goes balls to the wall or has a very cheap character to cast the snipe spells. Or is something like a druidism healing guy with snipes. So that would be Vampire Covenant, with some healing spells and some snipes together. It is a decent item in the sense that it is only 15 points more expensive than just a normal Talisman of Shielding, and it is really valuable on any model that you want to have a Talisman of Shielding on. For the Dread Prince, I don't value it that highly because, well, the Deadly Riposte already dissuades your opponent from striking at the Dread Prince. This item does that even more. Question is whether you want the opponent to strike at your Dread Prince or not. If you don't want them to strike at them, then maybe this is your pick. But then you're probably not going to benefit anything from it because people are just not going to strike you at all anymore, and instead will just try to break your unit. Even though it is really good to have a Dread Prince that can just do his job undisturbed. Then we have the Ring of the Obsidian Thrones. The Ring of the Obsidian Thrones, basically it's -1 to hit against scary stuff against your unit. So your opponent also gets -1 defensive skill for every special item in their unit. I think, well, I might overvalue this item a little bit because I think it's incredible. Because your defensive against scary choices just goes up to defensive 9 basically, meaning that a lot of choices have to roll a 5+ to hit you. Combine this with the Deadly Riposte and half of the attacks. Well, for every 2 attacks that hit you, you're gonna inflict an attack back at the enemy, provided that they don't have any rerolls to hit. So that is really good on this model. The -1 defensive skill for the enemy is not that important because you're already at offensive 8. But still, for 35 points, it's just a steal. If you have some 35 points left in your army with any character, I would say go for a Ring of the Obsidian Thrones. It can never just not pay back its worth. Then we have the Seal of the Republic. As earlier mentioned, it's a really great item for a on-foot only Dread Prince, because you are gonna do some wounds with your incredible stat line, and getting to a 1-up armor save is gonna be quite easy. It's a bit cheaper than the Essence of Mithril. I suppose it's because it can still go wrong. Because, well, you're gonna start out with a 5-up armor save, and if you don't get to your 1-up armor save quickly, by causing 4 wounds, then yeah, it's going to be a bit of a more struggle to get it up and running. Then we go to the Mask of the Warcrow. The bearer's unit gains fear, and also the bearer and any friendly unit that contains models with fear must reroll natural to wounds rolls of 1. On a great weapon, this would mean that basically all of your hits are going to become wounds, and you're hitting on 2+, if not 3+. Yeah, that's really good, but with a great weapon you're only going to have 5 attacks, so probably it's better if you take the Lacerating Touch or Hero's Heart again. It's a good item, it's a really good item, because any friendly unit that contains 1 or more models with fear within 6 inches of the bearer's unit, so that is actually quite a big bubble if you put this model in there. And all of these units are going to get a reroll of 1s to wound with close combat attacks. On some units it's going to matter more than on others, so likely on units with a lot of attacks this is going to be more substantial because you're going to reroll more often. On the other hand, on units that wound quite easily, like Judicators, it's also really valuable to just turn these these ones into anything but ones, and it gives you some guarantee of the rolls that you're making. So I think in an infantry list, this is nearly an auto include, especially with the Effigy of Dread, Crucible, Divine Altar. That's a really cool combination. Like for 250 points, you have this bubble of reroll once to wound. You have a bubble of fear for practically your entire army, and you also have channel 3. So that is a really good combination, I think. Yeah, so whenever you can build that into your list, I think you definitely should. Yeah, with that we have talked about the Dread Prince. So now let's go to the next choice, which is going to be the Beastmaster. So this model is a little bit of a toned down version of the Dread Prince in terms of offensive capabilities, yet still it has 4 attacks with offensive 5, strength 4, agility 7, AP1, with the lightning reflexes and ruthless efficiency. So you're stepping down an attack, you're stepping out down an 3 offensive skill and 1 agility. But you get a Will Breaker's Craft, so discipline tests of friendly gigantic models within 12 inches of one or more models with Will Breaker's Craft are subject to minimized roll. Also, friendly models are gonna get maximized roll, enemy models are gonna get minimized roll. So this model on a dragon is already really interesting. In addition, the model actually on foot is also quite interesting because it cannot be stomped. It starts with Kraken Side, so it starts with a 4-up armor save, so getting to this 2-up or 1-up armor save is definitely going to be a little bit easier. Yeah, I have been thinking of running this guy instead of a Dread Prince just because of the minimized roll on stomps. Then again, monsters are not going to survive that long until they probably are going to get mowed down by a Dark Elf infantry just because of the offensive capabilities of the models. But then on the other hand, it's really annoying to have like a giant just being left on 1 wound, then having a lot of attacks on your unit, and thunder stomping for another 6, and this guy can really help with that. I think it's meta dependent whether this is an interesting choice or not, in terms of running it on foot to counter the colossal beings on the enemies list. If you kind of mount it on a manticore, the only thing I would say is that you might want to make it into an extraordinary specimen so that it's going to get its D3 stomps, which is also going to be maximized. And other than that, yeah, I wouldn't mount him on a Raptor Chariot. I don't know why they included it as a choice because I feel like, well, in my opinion, it's less of a fluffy option for him. And the dragon, yeah, it's really incredible to get a dragon with maximized stomp, I feel. And the 4 attacks with the added bonuses of the Dread Elves are still going to be sufficient to get rolling. So this model has access to paired weapons, halberd and a lance, so he doesn't have access to a great weapon anymore. And he doesn't have access to a spear either. He can still get a shield, and the shield is quite interesting on this model because of the option of getting either Duskforged or Willow's Ward. And otherwise, yeah, the special items of the Dark Elves, the Moitor's Mirror, I would value it a little bit more highly because in this case, your opponent is not dissuaded from striking at your Beastmaster yet. So, through, for example, the Deadly Riposte rule earlier with the Dread Prince. So I think the rebound of the Aegis save has a bit of more value here. Then the Ring of the Obsidian Thrones is still as good as it used to be. Mask of the Warcrow is going to be quite terrible probably on this model because yeah, it's going to have a mount probably that already causes fear. Then again, yeah, if you can reroll the natural to wind rolls of your mount, then it can also be quite interesting. Yet I would say that it might be better to just give the Mask of the Warcrow to another model in your army and try to be within 6 inches of that bearer's unit. Seal of the Republic, I would say, is not that good because you can just, if you're fielding him on foot, just give him a shield, just give him Willow's Ward. You're already at a 2+ armor save. And you're also reduce the AP of any impact hits on your guy. The Beastmaster's Whistle, it's the specific Beastmaster's master item, and I'm really disappointed that I'm not too excited about this one. So it does give you maximized charge rolls of friendly models with type Beast within 12 inches. I don't really see the benefit yet. Maybe it's because I haven't looked at the Beast options too carefully yet. The Thunderherd are gonna, or the Thunderpack are gonna benefit from it. The Harpies are also gonna benefit from it because I believe they are beasts. So probably on Harpies it's quite cool to have it, but then again, just 30 points to upgrade your chaff unit is kind of much. And I guess with a Dragon or a Manticore, you're gonna go into positions where you're quite close to the enemy anyway, if you want to charge. Then Transcendence on this model, I would say, is better. Mostly on the Dragon, because you're gonna have the innate defense of a dragon anyway, so you are gonna be set up for the grind a little bit more than for example a Dread Prince, which makes it that it's more beneficial to stack up these strengths and armor piercing. Keep in mind that if you have fully maxed out your Transcendence and you charge again, you still get the +2 strength and strength and AP for the Lance Devastating Charge, I believe. So then you would go to an effective strength 8, AP 5, I think. Yeah, I think so. Then with Lacerating Touch, yeah, it is still interesting, yet we heard the arguments for Hero's Heart before, and I still think they're the same. Pride of Gardaikos, yeah, still kind of the same story. If you can get Hero's Heart, just get Hero's Heart. It's really good. Yeah, that's the Beastmaster. So let's continue with the next one, which is going to be the Legion Legate. So the Legion Legate. The Legion Legate is going to be your Discipline 10 guy. It's the model that is aligned with the Academy trained units in the game, in the army book. And it can also be the BSB. So this is the first option that we have as a BSB. And the BSB in Dread Elves is, I believe it's kind of necessary. I mean, Discipline 9 is nice, Discipline 10 is nice, minimized rolls for your beasts is really insane. Yet, it can still go wrong, and in Dread Elves, if it goes wrong, it's really annoying to see your big, scary stuff just flee the field on one of these discipline rolls. So BSB is definitely quite valuable to the army. You can also solve this by having a unit of Obsidian Guard, though, or multiple units of Obsidian Guard. But then again, BSB is quite valuable. So what else do we have? Well, this character only has 3 attacks. It does go up again from the Beastmaster to offensive 6 this time. And yeah, that's basically it. So it has only 3 HP, like everyone else. Defensive 6, which is kind of decent, but not too extreme. It can take the Kraken side, though this only boosts your army when you're on foot. So that's a bit of an incentive to go on foot. And this is the only hero choice or character choice that can take a spear. So the spear is associated with this model also with a special weapon enchantment, but we'll get to that later. So once again, from the left to the right, from the, bottom left all the way to the top right, we start with the Moith's Mirror. I think the Legion Legate, you can mount him or field him as your BSB or a general, and in that sense, he is a bit of a more valuable character because your opponent is going to get more points if they killed him. Yet he's only 170 points, so you can give him a ward save or an Aegis save, and yeah, you can also just not. I mean, if your opponent's going to focus on your model to kill him, it's still going to take quite some time to kill the model with snipe spells. And then I think that it's not really worth it to take this Aegis save. Mask of the Warcrow, I think this is a really good model to put it on because it's basically a model that wants to use its position to benefit the army with its disciplines. So it's really reasonable to have a unit in front of this unit, this model's unit, and to the sides of it that all fall under the aura of um, the divine altar that gives fear. So I think this is a prime candidate to give you Mask of the War crowd to. Then, as he is a BSB, you can also take the Eye of the Gorgon. Eye of the Gorgon is a really interesting banner enchantment. So the first line says that the bearer gains petrifying stare. It is the bearer, so enemy models have to be in base space with the bearer specifically in order to trigger this. That is interesting. It's not worth 50 points yet, but enemy units in base contact with the bearer must reroll successful discipline tests. If you combine this with the fear, that is quite strong, especially since people already cannot use BSBs for the reroll of the fear test. But with the -1 discipline and with no rerolls of successful discipline tests, you're gonna break enemy units way faster, especially steadfast units. So this is really an interesting upgrade on the model. Then we have the Ring of the Obsidian Thrones, which is once again interesting, but this model is gonna likely not be in combat as much as the other characters, so I would rather give it to another character if you have another character available. We have the Seal of the Republic. I think it's not that good on this model because he's not really the damage output model, so getting to a 1-up armor save is going to be a bit more of a struggle with this one. So you might as well just give him Kraken's Hide, give him a shield, give him once again something like Willer's Ward and be at a 2+ armor save and be happy about it. Then we have the Ring of the Ninth Legion, which is a Legion Legate only item. It's only 40 points and it gives you a unit with Academy training, models with Academy training. In the unit they gain battle focus, yet we do have the Academy banner that we can give to units. So in that sense, you can field them in, for example, a unit of Judicators, but I think also a unit of Obsidian Guard is really interesting to use this on, to get battle focus and get a lot more hits in the first round of combat. Then we have the Mastery of Slaughter, Lacerating Touch, Transcendence, Pride of God, Icos. I think they're all suboptimal on this model, just for the fact that he only has 3 attacks. Out of these enchantments, the Mastery of Slaughter is, in my view, still the most attractive one, just for the effect of adding extra combat scores to your wielder's side. Yet then again, you only have 3 attacks. You're likely gonna miss one. Because of parry or because of some other reason that makes you not hit on 2+ anymore. And then with only strength 4 and no upgrade of your Mastery of Slaughter, you just get the natural roll to wound roll of 1 that you reroll, which you might already have done with Mask of the Warcrow. Yeah, you are gonna wound once, maybe twice, so it's gonna be an extra combat rest probably. Because that is even before saves, and the combat score only triggers after saves by your opponent. We didn't talk about mounts for this option, for this model yet. So he has, I think, the most broad range of mounts available to him, with all of the mounts available except for the dragon. Now the Legion Legate himself, he already has Academy trained. So putting him on a Coastal Raptor or a Raptor Chariot is actually quite interesting here. Also on the Manticore is quite interesting, because these models all have Scent of Blood. So Scent of Blood means that you get a +1 inch advance against units that have already taken health point losses earlier in the game in the charge phase. And then the Academy training also gives you +1 advance on your charge range if you're within 8 inches of an Academy trained unit. So if you combine these, you get a +2 on your advance. It might even be interesting to get a BSB on a Raptor Chariot with a Banner of Speed, so you get a +3 on your charge range, so your Raptor Chariots actually go from advance 8 to advance 11 in the charge phase, which is kind of massive. So I playtested once with 2 Legion Legates and a normal Raptor Chariot to get a unit of Raptor Chariots. That was already quite effective in the previous edition with the Dread Elves, but this was kind of insane, especially with Witchcraft Magic, where you get an effective advance in your charge phase of a maximum of 13 inches, which is incredible. It's a bit high, but it's really fun to play with, and it's a ton of bricks once it hits another unit. The Raptor Chariots, they're all toned down to Resilience 4 only, which makes quite a big difference against all of those Strength 3 and 4 attacks. Against Strength 3 attacks, you're taking double the amount of saves. Against Strength 4, you're taking 1.5 times as many saves. So that is quite substantial. Yeah, the other interesting option for this guy is a Manticore, because of the Sand Blood of the Manticore. Yeah, I think this is going to be your go-to Manticore hero. So if you want to field a Manticore, you're going to put this guy on. Just also because as an individual model, he counts as a Legion unit, Academy trained unit, so it does trigger your surrounding units. So you can also combine this with Peter Auxiliary's special rule of suppressing fire, giving you a Legion Legate minus, basically distracting in the first round of combat. Then the next one is going to be the Temple Legate. The Temple Legate is a wizard adept in the army, and with access to divination magic and alchemy magic. It's 280 points, and basically right now it's quite cheap for what it does. So yeah, let's just go through it quite slowly. Basically, this is the old Death Hag or Cult Priest model. So he only has 3 attacks this iteration, so that's not even that much, with offensive 5, strength 4, AP 1, and agility 6, so those are not the most impressive stats. It does have battle focus, lightning reflexes, and ruthless efficiency, and as you can see, it has an Aegis of 4 up against melee attacks to start out with. This is quite interesting. It kind of dissuades you from taking any protective gear in terms of Aegis, like a Talisman of Shielding or the White Horse Mirror. And it also has professional courtesy, which means that it cannot be joined by other Temple Legates in the same unit, which is, I think, kind of good, because if you combine the Battle Oracle and the Warsmith in one unit, then it's going to be quite incredible to have in one unit. The model has access to either alchemy or divination, and if it goes for alchemy, then it becomes a warsmith, and the model must select from alchemy. Models with armor 4 or more in enemy units in base contact must reroll successful armor saves against wounds caused by Blades of Darak. The Blades of Darak are the militant or the temple related weapons. They give you +1 attack. They don't give ignore parry, but they do get. They don't give +1 offensive either, but they do give you +1 strength for every spell with duration 1 turn that affects the unit that the model is in. So, for example, Word of Iron of Alchemy is going to give you also +1 strength on the models in the unit with the Blades of Darak. It's quite an interesting option. It cannot be enchanted by any weapon enchantment, so that does rule out quite some weapon enchantments for the Temple Legate if you want to play the blades. Then the Battle Oracle. This model selects spells from divination. Enemy units in base contact with the model suffer -1 to hit against models using Blades of Darak. This upgrade to Battle Oracle and Warsmith, just as a side note, also means that Essence of Mithril or Essence of a Free Mind is useless on a Temple Legate, because you have to choose one of these paths before you can select your spells. Yes, so it's an interesting model. It's interesting to have as a BSB. It's kind of like a Master of the Canray Tower Sword Master model in Highborn Elves. But then the Temple Militant variant. Currently, a lot of people think they are a little bit on the cheap side for what they can do, but that also comes with the next choice, where we discuss the Wizard Master of the army. So basically, in order to set up a decent magic phase with the army, you either are going to combine Temple Legates and Warlock Acolytes, or you're going to use a Warlock Outcast, possibly with a Temple Legate, or possibly with a Warlock Acolyte champion. Now, the Temple Legate, he has access to a couple of special items. He doesn't have any special Temple Legate only items. He does have the Wizard only item, which is the Senran's Gambit, and the model can cast the wheel turns as a bound spell with power level 4 or 8. That is quite an interesting spell for Dread Elves, because you do still get your +1 to hit from lightning reflexes, and you do still get your ruthless efficiency. You would also, I guess, get the upgrade from the Battle Oracle that enemies are gonna hit you with a -1 to hit. That makes the wheel turns a really interesting spell for the models. But then again, it's a bound spell. You're gonna cast it on 2 dice with a power level of 4. You're gonna cast it on 3 dice with a power level of 8. Your opponent's gonna likely be able to dispel it. Yet we'll see with the Wizard Outcast, or the Warlock Outcast, an alternative better model to take this item. Then the Eye of the Gorgon, as discussed, is pretty good. Then we have the Mask of the Warcrow. The Bears unit gains Fear. This model, I believe the Temple Militants already have Fearless, so it's not that good on this model as with other models, because you get less benefit of getting Fear, even though the item is still really, really good. In terms of different characters that can take this, I think the Temple Legate is one of the less suited to take this. Then the Moithir's Mirror. Once again, you already have an Aegis 4 up against melee attacks, so spending a lot of points to get an Aegis 5 up doesn't really seem to be that worth it, because it's only going to trigger against ranged attacks that are focused, because otherwise you're going to be in combat, hopefully. If you're not, then stuff went wrong anyway. The Ring of the Obsidian Thrones is once again really good, also to increase the defense of this model, because you're possibly going to up to defense 8. And then if you combine that with a Battle Oracle, then Rank and File is likely going to hit you only on 6s, to be honest. The Seal of the Republic is good to just get to a 1 of armor save, even though Essence of Mithril is also kind of attractive, because you only have 3 attacks with this guy, even though you do have Battle Focus. Lacerating Touch seems really great, because you finally get a boost of attacks. So with paired weapons, that would be you would go to 6 attacks, which is quite impressive for a Temple Legate. Yet the Blades of Dara got 3 paired weapons with Lacerating Touch is 70 points. Is it worth it to get 3 extra attacks? I'm not too sure about that. I mean, you can save out with the Seal of the Republic a little bit, but then again, you can also just get the Blades of Darak and an Essence of Mithril. I think it also depends on how many Temple Legates you want to play. The Pride of Gardaikos. It's a nice weapon enchantment. Yeah, I think it's still being overshadowed by Hero's Heart, or even just Shieldbreaker. Shieldbreaker is also just great. But yeah, that's going to be the Temple Legate. So then we go to the next one, which is going to be the Warlock Outcast. The Warlock Outcast is the Wizard Master choice in the army. So the army does not have a Wizard Apprentice choice. So you're going to have to tune your magic phase with, well, Wizard Masters and Wizard Adepts. So there's a bit of critique going on the forums right now about the inclusion of a lot of Temple Legates in the army. Well, basically, this is your wizard, other than your Warlock Outcast. Like, one Warlock Outcast, a lot of people are not really a fan of playing only a Wizard Master, so they do have some supportive magic. You can either go for some Acolytes, or you can go for a Temple Legate. So it is quite natural that you see this model a lot, especially since it can be the BSB. So, and that effect is even strengthened by the fact that the Warlock Outcast has not a leader, so you want a model that can support your magic phase, that can be a BSB, which is the Temple Legate. So even if it's going to be like 350 points, I still think that the Temple Legate is going to be taken, just for the combination of BSB and Wizard. So what does the Warlock Outcast offer that the Temple Legate does not? Well, first of all, he's a Wizard Master. Second of all, he doesn't have 4 abilities in combat. A bit more serious, he does have the irresistible will rule, so the casting values of spells cast by the model are increased by +1. This is not good. This is not a bonus. This makes it harder to get spells off. So normally you cast a fireball on a 4+. For this model, he has to get a 5+ to cast a spell. And dispelling rolls against the spells cast by the model suffer a -2 modifier. So, for example, you want to cast Fireball, normally it's 4+. You roll a die, it's a 4, you get a +1 to cast because you are a Wizard Master, so it's going to be cast on a 5, and your opponent gets a -2 modifier on the dispel, so he needs to roll a 7. That is quite harsh, and on a lot of Wizard Masters that would be really devastating. Yet the fact that your casting values are going to be increased by +1 is nearly as punishing as the -2 on your dispelling rolls. Because that means that normally with a Wizard Master you can get a +1 on your casting rolls, so something like a Fireball you can suddenly cast on 1 die and be quite confident about it. For a Warlock Outcast it would only be a 50-50. Now he doesn't have any access to a Fireball, but the other paths do have quite some access to spells with varying casting values. And you're gonna likely see that with a Wizard Outcast, without any other possibility of increasing your casting rolls, other than a Scepter of Power that uses just a dice and it only works once per game, you don't have any guarantee that you're gonna get the spells through that you want. So you're gonna end up throwing more dice than you need normally for your spells, which is gonna convey a message to your opponent of really overspending on your casts, because you're gonna throw like 4 dice to get a 10+, because you really cannot afford of just missing the roll and not getting a magic phase at all, basically. So your opponent is going to be able to dispel one of your spells likely. Otherwise, you're going to cast a big spell. Probably you're going to cast a small spell, because that is all you're going to bargain for. And I think a magic phase where you're going to cast 3 spells with your Wizard Outcast successfully without them being dispelled by your opponent is going to be really limited. Now, the Wizard Outcast has a couple of mount options. Right now, I would say that the amount of attacks on the Warlock Outcast don't really allow it to go on a Manticore or a Dragon, so that's a bit of a shame, especially since the Dragon is 425 points, which is massive. So the Manticore could still be an option to make it a bit of an interesting combat character. I think it's more interesting than the Pegasus, because of the added combat capabilities, and you can shield your Manticore with other gigantic stuff in the army. Raptor or Horse, depends on the army that you play. Right now in the core section you also have the raiding party, which is light troops, so that's an ideal Warlock Outcast bunker. So I think you can get away just nearly all battles with just having him on foot with a unit of raiding party. The model does not have too much access to different magic equipments. I mean, you could take weapon enchantments on it, but I think that they're quite useless, nearly all of them. So I'm just going to focus on the 4 that might be a little bit more useful. We have Siren's Gambit, so this is the wheel turns. As I said before, this is more interesting on this model than on the Temple Legate, just because the irresistible will still triggers, because the model is the one that casts the bound spell. So whilst you're not going to get the +1 casting value of the bound spell, you are going to trigger the -2 modifier for the dispelling rolls of your opponent. Now for the lower level of the bound spell, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, because people are going to gamble 2 dice anyway to cast to dispel on a 6. Yet when you go to 3 dice and you're going to 3 dice go to a 10, your opponent might reconsider whether he wants to only use 3 dice to dispel your wheel turns. So I think this is a really good item for this Warlock Outcast. Question is whether you would want to not get some other stuff instead. Then the Mask of the Warcrow is going to be less useful on this model than on other models because he's going to be not as close to the fighting as other models, even though he's going to be quite close. I can still see it work with a Divine Altar, with the bubble, in a unit of raiding party where you are light troops, so you can modify the formation of your unit depending on which units you want to buff with your fear bubble, with your natural to wound wall bubble. But it seems to be easier to just put them on a character in a unit that's actually going to benefit from it. Ring of the Obsidian Thrones is really combat focused, so I wouldn't really put it on this model. And even then, if you go up to the maximum of defensive 7, I don't know it's going to make a lot of a difference. We have the Mythos Mirror again. On this model, it's going to be more valuable because it's more valuable model than a Temple Legate, for example. And it's nice to have an Aegis on your Wizard Master. It's nice to have an Aegis that protects you from snipe spells or ranged spells. So you could even put this enchantment on a Warlock Outcast mounted on a Manticore and just benefit from it. So that would be quite interesting indeed. The last model we're going to talk about is the Silent Assassin. It's funny that it's in the character section because it's not deployed on the table at the start of the game, and it doesn't have a lot of customization options. It's only 180 points, so it's quite cheap for a character. And I think it's mostly comparable to something like an Inquisitor in Empire of Sunstyle, just a support character that has a specific role that is going to maybe do its job. If it does its job, then it's going to be really good at it. If it doesn't, then yeah, you just lost a couple of points, but it's not too big of a deal probably. So what does this model do? Well, basically it's a missile that you throw at an enemy character and you hope that the character gets some wounds from the Silent Assassin. So that is its goal. Now how can you use it? So you can use it as that, and I think it's quite apt at that because it has 3 attacks, it goes to 4 attacks with either Blades of Darrak or paired weapons. And it has multiple wounds too against characters with AP 3. Yeah, and that is basically it. So it's gonna hit most characters on a 2+. It's gonna wound most characters on a 2+ or a 3+. Well, greater demons and the like on a 4+ or even a 5+. And then it's gonna deal double wounds. So to me it's a little bit of a shame that they didn't give it divine attacks, but that might be a little bit over the top. So I guess I understand where they went with this. Defensively, it doesn't have anything basically, with only 3 hit points, with defensive 7 and resilience 3. So even offensive 4 troops are going to hit him on a 4+. He only has resilience 3 and there is no armor at all. So he's really a fire and forget missile, but he might get the job done. Now at first sight, it's really an anti-character tool. I think it really has big value in MSU armies where it's also just a force multiplier. So, for example, you have a unit of crossbowmen somewhere standing, and your opponent has some choices. In his charge phase, you can pop this assassin in one of the crossbow units to dissuade your opponent from charging in. And you can still decide on which position in the unit this model is going to be. So in that way, I think that you can add just that little bit of extra force that you need to dissuade mostly characters, but also just units like knights. I mean, a unit of knights is not likely gonna find it attractive to charge into a unit that just got an assassin added to it. So in 9th Age, we play a lot of movement games, and a lot of these couple of early turns they decide more or less the playing field and where we want to go in and where we don't. And this is just a speed bump or just an alteration of this this equilibrium that you have between the 2 players. Where if someone is advancing up on your flanks with some knights, you can just pop the Silent Assassin in one of your units and make it way less attractive for your opponent to charge in, because he is going to strike 2 knights down, maybe 3 before the knights even gets his strike. And then if you put him on the corner of the unit, then the enemy is not even going to be able to redirect any attacks against him. So that is, in an MSU army, I think it's a really valuable piece. You can only have 2 in your army. They also have professional courtesy, so they cannot join other units that already contain an assassin, I believe. And with that, we went through the entire character section of the book. So now I'm still going to discuss the arcane compendium items and just very briefly about how they compare to suitability for the Dread Elves in comparison to the other army books. So let's start with the weapon and armor enchantments. So first off, we have Blessed Inscriptions, and I think this is a really good item for Dread Elves since you start with a high strength because of the +1 to wound in the first round of combat. And then you might not need yet reroll to wound, but even then it's quite nice. And Divine Attacks is always really nice against other characters, so it's a nice enchantment for Dread Prince, for example. Then we have Hero's Heart. Hero's Heart is always amazing on elves, any kinds of elves, because of already the +1 to hit, so the incentive to take paired weapons to negate the opponent's parry. And then you really become a powerhouse. And then with Strength 5, AP 3 on Dread Elves, with the +1 to wound, it gives you basically all the stuff that you need. You get extra attack, you get extra strength, you get extra 2 AP. This is an amazing item for Dread Elves. Yeah, then we go to Titanic Might. Titanic Might is not that useful in Dread Elves, I believe, because you already have the +1 to wound. And you don't really need it because a lot of your troops also are quite apt at dealing with monsters. Touch of Greatness basically is kind of as expensive nearly as Hero's Heart, but gives you less benefits. Then we have Kingslayer. Kingslayer is quite interesting because you only need to tip this little bonus that you want of getting 1 character close, and then it's basically a cheaper option of Hero's Heart. It is foot only, yet you do have some characters that want to be on foot. So instead of the Blades of Darak, you can also give a Kingslayer to a Temple Legate with paired weapons, for example. Then you start off at an equal strength and equal amount of attacks, but you are going to negate parry of the opponent. For the Blades of Darak version, every spell that is cast on the unit, you get an extra strength. For this version, you get an extra strength, attack, and AP for every character in the opposing unit. So it might actually win out in the end, even though probably you're going to put some magic in your unit anyway, if you have a Temple Legate in some militants or stuff. But if you don't have a Temple Legate focused army, then this might be better actually. Shieldbreaker is also a really interesting item for the Dread Elves because, well, the wounding part has already been settled with the +1 to wound in the first round of combat. You still cannot wound better on a 3+, so that is a bit of a disappointment, but just having like even a Dread Prince with paired weapons, Shieldbreaker is kind of interesting because you are going to go to 7 attacks with effectively Strength 5 first round of combat. With 6 attacks actually, because you start with 5, yeah. But that is still quite interesting. Probably it's more interesting on stuff like the Beastmaster that don't focus too much on combat and don't benefit as much from combat enchantments as the Dread Prince. Then we have Supernatural Dexterity. Well, your Dexterity is already incredibly high and your offensive is also quite high already, so it only gives you magical attacks basically. In most cases, so it's not that useful, or at least not compared to other armies. Cleansing Light, you do have alchemy in your armies, so getting flaming attacks can be useful. It's then basically a very cheap version of Blessed Inscriptions, but then I'd rather just get Blessed Inscriptions if I could. For armor enchantments, yeah, Death Cheater is as solid on Dread Elves as in any other book, I think. Then Destiny's Call, that is quite interesting. It can also be taken on a Pegasus now, making a Pegasus more viable than it used to be. Still, yeah, the Pegasus doesn't really have any advantage over any other mount, I believe, in the Dread Elf army. So maybe just keep this for your Wizard Master on foot with light armor. Probably it's one of the best choices to put it on. Then we have Duskforge. Duskforge is still really good, as is Duskforge in any other army. The +1 to wound really helps with being able to take a shield, like other heroes might want to forgo the shield to get an extra strength or so with halberd or great weapon. Dread Elves can pull it off to just take a shield and stay at AP1. It's kind of scary, but yeah, it's, Shieldbreaker Duskforge, this is a really interesting combo. Then Essence of Mithril is as good as with other armies, I would say. Basalt Infusion same, Ghostly Guard same, and the Willow's Ward also kind of the same. You have some interesting characters for Willow's Ward, so maybe it's a little bit better for Dread Elves than for other armies. Then let's go to the banner enchantments and the artifacts. So for the banner enchantments, we start with the Banner of Speed. I think it's as good as with other armies because, well, you have the Academy banner that already gives you the Devastating Charge +1 advance. So in that sense, it's not really needed. Then again, Dread Elves do really benefit from getting somewhere closer faster, especially against gunlines. So it does balance out a bit. So I think it's an average pick in the end. Running banner is really good because you already got settled on the strength basically, so the AP is really good to get a bit of extra. Banner of the Relentless Company seems a bit moot with Banner of Speed available and already getting March 10 on your normal units, March 12 if you have a Banner of Speed, and March 14 or 16 even if you have a Mist Leviathan nearby in the first round of the game. So Banner of the Relentless Company doesn't seem that necessary. Then, well, the list is a bit maxed up, so I'll just continue with the standards for now. The Stalker Standard, the unit gain Strider, is as good as with any other army. Flaming Standard is as good as with any other army that can only field an adept in alchemy. So normally with a Master of Alchemy, it's a good banner. For Dread Elves, it's kind of okay because you only have well the Wizard Adept that can take alchemy. You could take 2 of those, but I'd rather just take a Battle Oracle than to just spread out your chances. Banner of Discipline is really good on the flanks, but then again, also a unit of Obsidian Guard is really good, and it gives the same effect in a bubble. But then again, if you don't want to play Obsidian Guard, then you can take this. Aether Icon is as good as with other armies. Legion Standard is kind of bad because you don't have these very, very big units that are gonna get 4 full ranks, most likely. In terms of artifacts, the Book of Arcane Mastery is as good as it has always been. It's just a good item. Crown of Autocracy is likely not needed because, well, it's going to be mostly the difference between Discipline 9 and 10. Yeah, you will probably have already built in your BSB and some other panic mitigation, so it's going to be fine. Binding Scrolls are really important for Dread Elves, and well, the last games that I played, I've never left without at least 1 Binding Scroll, preferably 2, just to cancel these first 2 magic phases of your opponent that are really critical for Dread Elves, and I think it's a staple for the army. To take 2 Binding Scrolls. It seems a bit lame to do, but it really works. The Crown of the Wizard King, yeah, you don't really benefit much more from it than other armies. Magical Heirloom, it's just average. I think it's like it could have actually been read because the hereditary of the Dread Elves is kind of situational. It also depends on the army that you play. If you play a fast cav army, the spell is kind of useless. If you play monster heavy, it's kind of useless because you don't have just a lot of wounds in your army. Then we have the Talisman of Shielding. It seems to be a bit worse than the Moitis Mirror, so if you have the points, then I would take that one. Talisman of Avoid, it seems like the Divine Altar that gives you channel 3 is kind of better than this. The Essence of a Free Mind is... I haven't looked at this one actually. So I am quite interested in maybe taking it on a Wizard Master to be able to switch between Cosmology and Witchcraft. Cosmology more as a lore that is more useful if you don't see a gun line on the other side of the field, and Witchcraft as the other alternative. Then we go to the other list. So The remaining special items are going to be the Scepter of Power first. So this is quite a nice item on a wizard or a warlock outcast, as you can be a little bit more risky with your casting dice. I haven't tried it out yet, but it seems quite appealing to just go for this a little more riskier casting. Maybe get an extra spell through, but that's going to be one extra spell in the game. So yeah, 40 points seems a bit steep. Crystal Ball, yes, you don't have any benefits to help you with this, so it doesn't seem that good. Lightning Vambraces is going to be better on average on a um, on a Warlock outcast, even though it's only 2d6 strength 3 for 2 power dice at least. So yeah, I don't know if this item is good enough. If it had been AP 1 at least, then it might have been better. I think it's still a nice item to clear some chaff. It's basically a reusable dragon staff with a way longer range, but it does sap into your magic. Maybe it allows for a play where you don't have a wizard adept anymore in your army. You just play 2 bound spells, so the Siren's Gambit and Lightning Vambraces on a Warlock outcast with a Divine Altar, and then you're done. The Rod of Battle seems kind of useless because most of the times you're going to be hitting on 2+ anyways. Dragon Staff seems average, as average in the army as for other armies. Ranger Boots seems not that interesting because, yeah, you don't really have a use for it other than the Beastmaster. The Beastmaster might actually benefit from this item quite nicely. If you feel them just not as your general, you can put this one on. So you get March 14 instead of March 10. It's not a big benefit you get, but it's a model that you can just run on foot, just run around because he cannot be stunned. So that is quite a big rule for this model to have. And then if you start out with him in a unit with a banner of speed within distance of a Mist Leviathan, then you can get up to a march rate of 20 inches. So that is quite funky to do. It's basically a version of the vanguarding Pegasus hero that you had before in Dread Elves, but then it's a single model and it only goes 20 inches. So I don't know. It's probably fun for a tournament once. Obsidian Rock, it's just as average as for the armies, I think. Dragonfire Gem, yes, same. Potion of Swiftness is really great on a Dread Prince, but I think that's the only model in the army that really benefits from it. And then the Lucky Charm and the Potion of Strength are going to be as similar as for other armies. Yeah. Well, we are 1 hour into this video, so I'm not going to make it any longer now. So thank you for watching. I'm going to continue with the core and the special and all of these different categories in the future. Likely these videos are going to be a bit shorter because well, the special section is quite elaborate, but there's no special items and stuff associated with them. So that is going to save some time. The fact that there's more choices is going to make the videos a little bit longer. We'll see how it turns out. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you the next time.